Here's a little problem you might run into when you're stringing a thick, stiff polyester string, especially a 15L gauge like this one is, when you get near the bottom of the frame. Because I don't have very much string left over, I can't go through and weave one ahead, so I'm just weaving the string I'm going to tension. What I'm going to do is get the string started through there first, and then instead of pushing this through using a needle and thread method, I think that's going to kink my string up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a loop of string right here, small loop, and I'm going to push it down under the string that I want to go under and push it up with my bottom finger, and then just pull the string through. Alright, I'm going to go all the way across this way, and I'm pushing with the tag end of the string here at the same time that I'm pushing up. Well, I push it down and then I pull it through. I push it down and then I pull it through. I push it down, push it up, and pull it through. And I just do this all the way across the tennis racket. And by the time I get to the other side, I haven't kinked my string all up, I haven't twisted my string all up, and I'm ready to pull tension on it. And then I can just do the bottom two crosses the same way. I'm almost done stringing the mains on this tennis racket, and I already know that I'm going to have a small problem when I go to tie off or weave in the bottom cross. And the reason for that is because there's going to be two strings blocking hole 7 bottom, or 7 throat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a blunt nose needle inside this grommet. This is a 14 gauge blunt nose needle. And that blunt nose needle is going to hold this string out of the way of that grommet hole. Okay? What I'm going to try to do is get that string on the outside of the frame above this needle. So I'm going to hold it up on top of the needle and then pull tension. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. One thing you have to make sure of now is I already know that my bottom cross is going to tie off down here on this side of the racket. So I want the opening for the needle to be pointing away from this knot location, because my string is going to go in here, come out of the grommet here, in here, and come out over here. So again, I want this string on top, and I'll show you why I want it on top later. I'm not increasing tension on the last cross string because I don't really feel a need to. What I've done now is I've clamped this string so that my string is straight, but I haven't tightened the base yet. When I tighten the base up, I want to make sure that this clamp does not move. A lot of times when you tighten the base up, your clamp itself will actually move off center. So it didn't move, so I should be good to go. Now I can tie off this string. If I can quit standing on it. Again, I'm going to go on top of this needle. Okay, I'm going to tie a Parnell knot, which means I go over and under. And I come down to a fairly small loop. Then I'm going to go, it's on the inside, so I'm going to go over this string, back under it, and up through that small loop. when I go up through the small loop, I want to make sure that I have the loop right here on the same side that I started my tag end on, which was on this side. I want this tag end to come up through this loop and this loop so that my loop is over here. Or excuse me, my tag end is over here. My loop is here towards the inside of the racket. Then I'm going to use my starting clamp just to pull tension on it. Right now my knot is tied. What I do with this string, when I tighten up this loop, just tightens up that loop. I want the loop to be as small as possible, so I'm going to pull up on it a little bit, but I'm not going to pull up on it as hard as I did that first loop, because that first loop was the knot that held the string. This one you just want to look neat, so I'm going to pull it up enough to get my loop snug and my string in the direction I want it in. Okay? Now I can come over to the other side and do the same thing. Barely got enough string to reach my gripper here. Okay, again, I get my clamp as far down as I can get it without bending it out of shape, and I clamp that string. Then when I tighten up the base, I want to make sure this doesn't move. And it didn't. Now I can tie my knot. Again, I want to go on top of the needle, and you can see here now that my tag end is on the inside of this anchor string. I want to go over, under, and through and pull it down to a small loop. Okay? Now my tag end's on the opposite side again. I want to go over, under, and through so that my tag end ends up on the other side of that anchor string and my loop is on the initial side or inside where my tag end started. Then again, I'm going to tension up my knot. This one, I just want to get it snug and get my string pointed in the right direction, pointed up. And then I can release the base. When I release the base, this clamp may or may not move. It'll probably move some. It moved a little bit, not much. All right. Then I can release my string. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to hold it up in the direction I want it in, release the base. Now I can trim my strings. This long end here now is what I'm going to use to start the crosses at the top of the racket. The short end down here I can just throw away. Now that I've got my knots tied, I can release everything. What I'm going to do now is, this is the end that was connected right down here, okay? And this is the end where I used a starting clamp right there to actually pull on this knot right here. So I don't want to put this end over here and tie a knot with it. So I'm going to use the other end of my string. Also, the other end of my string where I cut it off has got a nice little point on it. Now I'm going to plan ahead a little bit. I know I'm going to tie off at this location right down here. And this location right down here is on the 17th cross. And that location right there is extremely close to this outside main. So I don't want to end up with very, very little room down here to tie off my knot. So I want this main string, which is the intersecting string on the 17th cross, on this side where I'm tying off, to be below this cross string. If I want an odd numbered cross down here to be above this string, I want an odd numbered cross up here to be above that string. I always start weaving above or excuse me, I usually start weaving on the third cross from the top, and I'll pre-weave 3 crosses in. I've made sure that I go on top of this cross main string, so I go on top down here so my knot will slide back and forth. Then I'm going to go on and pre-weave the top crosses. If I can quit standing on my string. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an eye knot, or what I call an eye knot, which is an inverted VS starting knot, to tie my top cross. To do that now, I've got my string, my tag end, on the inside of my anchor string. I'm going to go over, under, and through so that my tag end again is on the inside of my anchor string. I'm going to go over, under, and through so that my tag end is still on the inside, and I've got my 2 loops right here. I want to go through these 2 loops so that the tag end ends up on the outside of my anchor string. I don't want to go through these 2 loops and have my tag end stay on the inside here. If I do, I end up with a knot difficult to cinch up. If you ever try it, you'll see the difference. Okay, so I'm going to go through, and now, because I want to use a very short section of string, I'm going to hold this in with a starting clamp and grab the string that came through initially on that I was tying off. Then I just pull the knot down fairly snug. Doesn't have to be real snug. Then I'm going to pull my string through, and I've got my starting knot. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull tension on that starting knot, but before I do, I want to show you what it's going to look like as I pull tension. So I'm going to set my brake and move the camera. Okay, there's my starting knot now, and I could pull this end up and get rid of that little loop right there if I wanted to, but I don't really need to. I'm going to pull tension on that knot. As I pulled tension, it tightened up that knot just fine. Now what I like to do is I like to trim this knot right here, right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my starting clamp, and again, my knot's already tied. There's nothing I can do to make this knot hold any better. But there's a little bitty loop down here that went back up through there that isn't really tight. So what I'm going to do is just snug it up a little bit. And at the same time, I'm getting my tag in right here to lay up the frame. Once I've done that, I can trim off this little piece, and I wasted about 2 inches of string there. Okay, I wasted no string down there when I cut off that long end. So I'm actually stringing this racket with about 34 feet of string. I'm right back to the point where I was on the last racket, where I was stringing the bottom 3 crosses with a 15 gauge polyester string. But this string is a lot smoother, and it's a lot softer and easier to get in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go on and push weave or needle and thread this one across there. Okay. I need to get around this needle here though. That'll get me right through there. And this string doesn't kink up